You've probably heard the story a million times. It's one of the most famous in the world. A body taken down from a cross, placed in a rock-hewn tomb, and a giant stone rolled in front to seal it. But what if that's not the whole picture? Today, we're going to dig in, literally, using archaeology as our guide to investigate what the evidence really tells us. So when you picture Jesus' tomb, this is probably what comes to mind, right? A cave carved right out of the rock with one of those massive, round stones sealing the entrance. It's exactly how the Gospels describe it, and it's become a truly iconic image. But here's the big question. How much of that story holds up when you really look at the history and the archaeology? Was Jesus actually buried this way? To figure that out, we've got to put on our detective hats and start sorting through the clues from the past. Okay, but here's where the investigation takes a really sharp turn. There are a number of very serious scholars who've put forward a pretty shocking theory that Jesus was never actually given a proper burial. At all. This idea obviously completely challenges the traditional story. So which is it? Let's open the case file. All right, first things first. To solve any case, you have to understand the crime scene. And for us, that's first century Jerusalem. The way people were buried back then is going to tell us a whole lot about what was possible and what was probable. You see, back in Jesus' day, if you had money, you didn't just get buried in a hole in the ground. No, you had a family tomb carved by hand right out of the rocky hills around the city. These things were expensive, they were meant to last for generations, and they were a major status symbol. But for everyone else, the poor, they were buried in simple trench graves that, honestly, have left almost no trace for archaeologists to find. And you know, these tombs didn't just look one way forever. Their design actually changed a lot over time. Centuries earlier, you just lay a body out on a stone bench. But by Jesus' time, new ideas had come on. And a big reason for that was the influence from the Greek or Hellenistic culture all around them. This brought in new features like something called loculi and eventually ossuaries. And wow, you can really see that influence here. On the left, that's the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And on the right, that's a huge tomb from Jerusalem. I mean, just look at the two. The inspiration is unmistakable, right? You've got the columns, that pyramid-style top. The elites in Jerusalem were totally borrowing these grand styles. So one of the biggest changes they adopted was this thing called a loculus, or koch in Hebrew. Instead of those old open benches, tombs now had these long, narrow shafts carved straight into the walls. Think of them like bunk beds for the dead, each one designed for a single body. It was a really smart, space-saving design they picked up from the Hellenistic world. Okay, so stick with me here. After about a year, once the body had, well, decomposed, the family would come back, gather up the bones, and place them in a small stone box called an ossuary. This was the final step. It cleared out the burial niche, which meant you could reuse that expensive spot for the next person in the family. Super efficient, right? And this was the standard practice right around the time of Jesus. All right, so now we've got a pretty good picture of what a proper, wealthy Jewish burial looked like. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of the argument, the case that Jesus, as a victim of Roman crucifixion, would never have gotten one. And this quote from scholar John Dominic Crossan, I mean, it doesn't get much more blunt than that. The idea is that the whole point of crucifixion was a humiliation that was supposed to continue long after you were dead. So the thinking here goes like this. Roman crucifixion wasn't just about killing someone. No, it was public. It was a horrifying spectacle meant to be a warning to anyone else thinking of causing trouble. So if you let the victim's family come and give them a nice, honorable burial, well, that would completely defeat the purpose, wouldn't it? Okay, we've laid out the scene, and we have 2 totally conflicting theories on the table. It's time to bring in the hard evidence, from ancient texts and modern archaeology, to see which story actually holds water. Now, this slide right here, this might be the single most important piece of the whole puzzle. You see, Jesus was executed by the Romans for a Roman crime, but his followers were Jewish, and they were bound by Jewish law, which demanded that even a criminal had to be buried before sundown. You had 2 totally different sets of rules clashing in the same city. And look, we don't even have to guess about this. The historian Josephus, who was writing in the 1st century, tells us flat out that it was the Jewish custom to take down and bury men who had been crucified. That's coming from a guy who was actually there, writing about his own time. That's a huge piece of evidence. Okay, but a line in a book is one thing. Is there any, Physical proof. Is there hard evidence? Has archaeology ever found a single case of a crucified man who got a proper, honorable Jewish burial in a family tomb? Well, take a look at this. This right here is the smoking gun. It's the heel bone of a first-century man named Yehohanan, and it has an iron crucifixion nail driven right through it. And here's the absolute kicker. This bone was found inside one of those stone bone boxes, an ossuary, which was inside a proper family tomb in Jerusalem. This is it. This is concrete proof that it did happen, at least once. Okay, so the obvious question is, if this happened, why have we only found one? Is this just a fluke? Well, there are a few really good reasons. For one, finding any ancient tomb that hasn't been looted is incredibly rare. Plus, most crucifixion victims were poor. They wouldn't have had these fancy tombs anyway. But the biggest reason is that those iron nails were valuable, so they were almost always pulled out and reused. What happened with Yohanan was a total freak accident. The nail hit a hard knot in the wood, bent, and they just couldn't pull it out. So finding even one is amazing. All right, let's bring it all home. We've looked at the burial customs, we've heard the skeptical argument, and we've seen the hard physical evidence. So now let's go back to the original story and see how it holds up. So when you go back and look at the story in the Gospels, suddenly every detail just clicks into place. A wealthy follower offers his own rock-cut family tomb. Check. The body's prepared and put inside. Check. The entrance is sealed with a big stone. Check. Every single step aligns perfectly with what we now know about the burial customs of the time. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The archaeologist Dr. Jody Magnus, whose research we're leaning on here, says the exact same thing. The story, as it's told, is consistent with the archaeological evidence on the ground. So here's the bottom line. Archaeology can't prove a miracle happened. It can't prove that a specific guy named Jesus was buried in a specific tomb. But what it can do, and what it does do, is show us that the story as it's told isn't some fantasy made up years later. It's a narrative that fits perfectly within its time and place. It's historically plausible. So, what this all shows is pretty cool, right? By carefully sifting through the physical evidence, we can put these ancient stories to the test and sometimes find surprising truths just waiting to be uncovered. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other ancient mysteries, what other big stories from our past could we unlock if we just keep digging?